Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host Craig Fowler, back once again to look over the 6 matches which took place in the Scottish Premiership weekend. And helping me to do it this time, we're taking the podcast back into the DeLorean, going all the way back to 2009 through to 2012. Joining me once again for a Monday show to look back over the weekend's events, it is my Terrace co-founder, Alan Temple. Hello, Alan. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, Craig. Please don't take us back to the days when we were young and enthusiastic and had our whole lives ahead of us. It's just too bleak at this point.
Fatherhood treating you well, then?
Yes. Yeah, as I was saying the quiet part out loud there. I'm very well. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. I'm not too bad. Still a bit tired after the weekend. I really should start. It comes to every weekend and I keep forgetting how busy my Mondays are with reading up on every single match that took place or watching them back on Y-Scout. And yeah, I keep forgetting that when it's a Saturday night and I'm like, yeah, I'll have another drink.
Was it that? I just assumed Hearts and Rangers had played you into a coma. I thought that was a residual tiredness from that.
Well, yeah, that was one of the... So I watched across the 2 days yesterday, didn't I? I was too hungover to watch Celtic, so I watched that back earlier today. But I watched the game. I saw a game on Saturday at 3, caught most of the Aberdeen game and the Hearts game. By the end of points to the second half of the Hearts game, I was just could find myself drifting towards my phone. And I was like, put it down. It was just my mind was just naturally looking for some sort of stimulation that wasn't being brought on by the two teams on the field at Ibrox.
I hear that.
Yeah. So we'll not begin with that game. In fact, spoiler alert, that's going to be the last game we do. And it's lucky we're even doing it that. But we shall begin with your area of expertise, Alan. You are the Dundee United correspondent for the Courier, and United got themselves, in the end, a comprehensive victory this last weekend, beating Ross County by 3-0. Lucas Stevenson, Sam Dalby, and on his top-flight debut, 17-year-old Owen Sturton. I think we're going with
Sturton, that's the man, Forfar's finest.
And that means a 3-0 victory for United to begin their impressive start to the Scottish Premiership campaign. And Alan, I think it was on Friday, somebody asked me for tips for the weekend, Scottish Premiership. And I think somebody, and incorrectly, I hate when people do this, because even though I'm quite good at, I'm not bad at winning accumulators, but it usually means that I avoid any game involving a Scottish side whatsoever, because it's just, other than Celtic and Rangers, and even then this season, one of them's not been that easy to predict. It's just impossible. And I looked at that United game and I was like, that's the kind of team that United, or that kind of game where I think United maybe struggle the most. They've been very impressive since coming up, but they've not been that impressive going forward as they have been defending. And against a team that are, maybe sitting in the first half and maybe causing problems. We saw it early in the campaign with St Johnstone, went to Tannadice when Levine was still the manager and with a better team in the first half. And I think United in general have looked kind of better playing away from home than they have at Tannadice. But in this one, they eventually managed to get the 3-0 victory. And despite that, though, looking at the stats in the first half and looking at the highlights, it did look like it still took them a while to find their way into the game. Because County, again, only going by the highlights, this is the one game I didn't see any of it, kind of watching it back. It did seem like they did manage to cause them problems in that opening period.
Yeah, your assessment is pretty much bang on. I mean, that is how the first half went. And I think people were making the mistake of looking at the stat you had a lot in the build-up was the 14 months and 22 Premiership away games without a win for Ross County, which is all fine and well, but that doesn't mean you're losing all of those games. And of late, they'd only lost 2 of their last 8 in the Premiership, and they'd only keep consecutive clean sheets. So this was a team that was never going to be easy to score against. At the point where Dundee United scored, Ross County had hit the 300-minute mark without conceding a Premiership goal. So it shouldn't be overstated that this wasn't just a box-ticking exercise that Dundee United were always going to win. It was a good one. It took a good goal to eventually break them down. That Lucas Stevenson goal from Manny Adebayoga winning the ball down on the touchline into Stevenson. Stevenson at the halfway line starts that move effectively, zipping it out to Will Ferry. Beautiful overlap from Kevin Holt, opens up a gap into which Will Ferry can whip a wonderful ball into. And then it's Lucas Stevenson that's continuing that run. It's brilliant midfield play, genuinely brilliant midfield play from a player starting his first game in midfield for in senior football, I think, because when he was loaned out to Barrow, he was played at right wing back. He's played right wing back for Dundee United. So although he came through the youth ranks as a central midfielder, this is his first game back in that position, and he took to it like a duck to water. That's 5 goal contributions he's got this season now, 3 in the Premiership. So that's 3 goals, 2 assists. So Lucas Stevenson's been real revelation. Been excellent for Dundee United, and that opened the floodgates. The second goal was a horror show from Ross County, so we can stop talking about their defensive solidity the moment they actually have to come out and play a little bit clearly. So that's a problem they're going to have to figure out. But from that moment onwards, then it became something of a procession. But United were good in the second half, probably their best 45 minutes of the season, and they showed that they actually are capable of being a good front foot side. Are they going to throw everything out, throw the baby out with the bathwater and start going gung-ho for 90 minutes? No, they'll probably still continue with this philosophy of don't lose the match and then win it, because why on earth would you change anything right now? They're sitting 4th in the table, and it's a team that's been ravaged by injuries of late. They were effectively missing what could be considered a spine through Ross Graham, Craig Sibbald, Ross Docherty, Louis Moult, Christian Trapanovsky. These are players that you could argue 5 of which would be in their starting lineup, and they're still winning games, they're still picking up points, and they're still sitting 4th in the table. So another really good win, and it's one of those things. You've been doing this for a long time as well, and see when things are going well, just good vibes can sometimes stack up, and that's what the Owen starting goal was. Like, see when things are going your way, little toppers can occasionally happen that just build on the momentum and just add to the feel-good factor. And that's exactly what the Owen starting goal was. A minute after coming onto the pitch, a boy that was a season ticket holder before going onto the books at Dundee United, just to make you feel old. I've spoke to him a couple of times previously. He's somebody who grew up idolising Stuart Armstrong and Ryan Gold and Gary Mackay-Steven. Yeah, so
Jesus Christ, he was born in January 2007.
I know, it's actually beyond a joke. This podcast is nearly as old as Owen started. The idea for this podcast is much older than Owen starting, as you'll recall. So it's a great moment for him. It was the most I've seen Jim Goodwin celebrate a goal that wasn't the one against Hibs in the 99th minute. So he was delighted for the boy, and that's what I mean. That goal didn't change anything as such. If it hadn't gone in, it wouldn't have made that much of a difference. Nothing's going to be decided by one goal difference over the course of a season. But it just adds to the feel good factor, adds to the momentum. And when things are going your way, wee things like that can happen. So things going well for Dundee United at the moment. Less so for Ross County. They'd probably take where they are in the league right now, but they do have real problems going forward. They're stodgy, they're hard to score against, but the Cowie brothers will need to figure out a way to be more potent going forward, because when posed with that challenge, they had nothing.
Yeah, it's a funny one with County. I think this season, Cowie was very much that he was going to play the system they've played all campaign, which is a 3-5-2. So they don't really have any wingers in their squad. They kind of have limited options on how to change things. They've tried different things with kind of Jordan White in and out of the team, but again, it just kind of goes back to the point that there seems to have been there's been no progression from that. That's been their kind of main game plan A for a number of years now, and they tried to move away with it, but they never managed to do anything that lasts for any length of time. And you see, I didn't see anything of this game other than the highlights, but I did manage to get a couple of quick stats from Wyscout in the past weekend. Jordan White was by far and away the player in the league who contested the most aerial duels. That tells you everything about Ross County's approach this match was to go direct to him and play off him and get the guys like Denham and Nisbet and then Chilvers off the bench close to him to try and make things happen. Ronan Hale, obviously, as well, his strike partner. But again, kind of coming back to that kind of quality out wide, James Brown's fine as a right wing back. He's all right. He's not a real difference maker. He's not a real difference maker, like in the like in around the opposing penalty area. He can get forward well enough. He's kind of wee, kind of got that wee kind of shimmy and kind of running style that he gets up and down the park. Elijah Campbell on the other side, he kind of looks like a centre half playing at left wing back. And I know they didn't really kind of rate Josh Reid and George Harman. This is a bit of a miss, but you should have a bit more options out wide than they do. But another start I noticed, just going back to United, and I have been critical of United this season in terms of the attack and feeling like the pieces don't all fit together. I think for this game, the game plan and the pieces made a bit more sense because Will Ferry and Ryan Strain were first and second from any player in the top flight this past weekend for crosses attempted. 15 for Ferry, 10 for Strain. They were also first and third for dribbles attempted. And Dundee United had both Sam Dalby and York van de Sande in the starting 11. So it seems very much like the game plan was get it wide to these guys, get balls into the penalty area for the big guys we've got up front to try and attack.
Absolutely. And also having that aspect of the team locked down and fairly common sense, it also allowed them to have a 3 in the middle of the park, which afforded, I thought, far more balance than has been apparent in some games this season. Babunski was released to get forward and play dangerous passes. Lucas Stevenson did everything, box to box. Great engine on the lad, really, really good engine. And Vico Chauvel was an absolute monster. Defensive midfield.
He had most interceptions of any player in the top flight this past weekend.
He was sensational. I had to check there wasn't 2 of them on the pitch. And then you see him in the second half. He hits the post and he puts in the cross for Owen Starton's goal, and you're going, how are you there? But you're still, according to your heat map and your interceptions, you're occupying this area, in the base of midfield, but you're still making it everywhere else and making a difference elsewhere on the pitch. He was, honestly, it was a masterful display of defensive midfield. And, any formation in any team, it should be about getting the best out of as many of your good players as possible. And I would suggest that so far this season, there's an argument that that's the best that they've managed to get out of the most players on the pitch, if that makes sense. Jim Goodwin does like this 3-4-3 formation, and I'm more inclined to think that it's one that's more suited to playing away from home. I don't think he's going to necessarily play 2 strikers and only 1 wide player each side when they go away from home to places, because I think the fact that 3, the 3-4-3 becomes a 5-4-1 very, very easily is something that he likes. He can you get your 5 at the back, you can get a 4 that can shuffle narrow, and you've got your lone striker, and it doesn't make for good viewing sometimes, and he'll then tweak that later on in games, because the key thing is still being in the game in the later stages. So I think he might still continue with that on the road, because although you can say 3-4-3, it sounds like the more attacking of the formations, it's not really in practice. It's a formation that the transition is supposed to be quite attacking if you can get your counter-attack right, but fundamentally the ease with which that becomes a 5-4-1 is something that I think is quite attractive and has proved to be really difficult to score against. I mean, you saw with Aberdeen at the weekend, you can play as well as you like, but if you don't have your defensive shape sorted, when you lose the ball, they'll score lots of goals against you, and that's the case with a few teams. So I don't think he'll change much on the road, but see, in terms of Tannadice, which is, to go back to begin the discussion, that's been perhaps the question mark over Dundee United. How are they going to perform at Tannadice when a team comes along and says, well, you're Dundee United, you're maybe newly promoted, but you're the 6th biggest team in the country. There's 10,000 fans here, come and beat us. How do you deal with that? And I would suggest the way he lined up and the pace with which they played at the weekend is maybe the answer to that.
Right, let's move on to our second game, and let's move to the game which took place. Another 3 p.m. kickoff on the Saturday. Hibs won St Mirren 2. St Mirren took a 2-0 lead in the 31st minute. Conor McMenamin scoring both goals for the Buddies. Nicky Cadden got one back from the penalty spot in injury time, and then it seemed like Cadden had managed to rescue the most unlikely of points, but not for the first time this weekend. VAR intervened to ruin some of the fun. Well, unless you're like me and a Hearts supporter, in which it was very funny for those celebrations to have been quite premature, and for Hibs to lose another game and to remain bottom of the Scottish Premiership table. At the time of recording, David Gray is still in a job. There are rumours that that's not going to be for much longer. Whether that comes to fruition or not, I'm not entirely sure, but certainly the pressure increasing on the embattled Hibs boss. Alan, I watched the first half of this one because I kind of knew what the second half was going to be. A lot of St Mirren kind of defending what they had, and Hibs kind of desperately trying to get back in the game while not doing an awful lot. And going by the highlights of the second period, that's what it looked like. St Mirren even had a really good chance to extend their lead when Richard Taylor hit the bar, and then the rebound came out to Alex Gogic, who just couldn't. Looks like a bad miss, but he just couldn't react in enough time to kind of get his head over the ball, and ended up heading it over from about 2 yards out. But I mean, I have to go back to the first half, and as I was watching it, Hibs are they're so soft. They're so soft in so many ways. Like, even like when they keep like a hold of the position all the time, it's because obviously the defence is a big concern. And you can see with that second goal, that's kind of their problems. That's the kind of main problem all season. O'Hara is terrible to give it away in the first place. But then Ekpiteta doesn't notice where the real danger is. He cares too much about the run from Olasanya. He's caring too much about trying to stop a pass, which doesn't come, because McMenamin just like, okay, you're just giving me a free run to goal, so I'm just going to go and have a shot. And then Bursic just lies down and lets the ball go through.
The goalkeeper does what Ekpiteta's done, which is try to stop something that is yet to happen, because he's looking at Olasanya, who has a tap in, and he's getting ready for that square ball across. So basically, everybody has assumed McMenamin's not going to just run through and shoot, which is pretty much the first thing that you need to stop. But it's the same catalogue of errors from largely the same people that have been making errors, and it must drive the manager absolutely tonto. He clearly can't be absolved of blame, but goodness me, there are certain things on that pitch that, and I guess you saw about O'Hara getting taken off at half time. I mean, there's certain things that must happen on that pitch that you think, we have never even remotely coached anything like this. So what on earth are you doing? So it was quite. It's remarkable to watch a team that, in theory, should be capable of so much more get consistently undone by stupid errors and a total lack of resolve and character. It's a real damning indictment of the recruitment, in my view. I think more than anything, the lack of. It's just a real lack of leadership and direction and identity at that football club at the moment, and it's a big problem. I think everything filters down from that. I really do.
There was a real softness to the first goal as well. I thought, like, McMenamin does really well. Like, he plays a part in the build-up and then he finishes it, but not for the first time in a game at Easter Road quite recently. Kwon is just like, at least this time he properly pays attention and runs alongside McMenamin getting into the penalty area. Doesn't really do enough to try and get goal side, so when the cross comes in and McMenamin's in a good position to score, he can actually do something about it. But that's just like typical of Hibs. Like, I've always kind of thought Newell as well is a bit like that. Joe Newell's a player that, I mean, well, before this season, I've always been a big fan of and thought he's one of the best in the top flight in his area. But he's always been somebody that's struggled to track runners from midfield. Dylan Levitt, good off the bench in this one, came on at half time. But again, another player who just not strong enough defensively. And there's now a softness to them going forward. So I felt earlier in the season, I was looking at Hibs' team going, there's a lot of options up front there who have kind of proven at this level. And even when Trantis first came back and they were playing him in the centre mid, where he looked decent last year when he played and looked decent when he first arrived back, and Kwon was good at St Mirren and had Newell ahead of him, I was thinking they've got a good team from midfield to front. They've got a chance of doing something in this league if the defence can just be kind of bailed out enough times, or they can protect it enough, or they can just outscore opponents. But now when they go forward, it's just the kind of the passer up the ball around, but the the threats just aren't coming often enough. I think in the first period, the best chance they had was Johan hitting the post. And a lot of that is down to just Johan himself, just that kind of individual player doing something. Johan wasn't great across this game. He played the full 90. He wasn't great.
He's far from the worst.
Yeah, he's far from the worst. And it just, as now as these matches are going on for David Gray, not only is the defence not getting better, there was a period where you could have started to look at it, like Ekpiteta, for instance, started the season really poorly. We're starting to settle down a bit and we're starting to have some decent games. You thought, okay, maybe this is turning for the defence. But it's clearly not the case. The defence is still pish. The centre-halves are not good enough. The goalie's not good enough. Obito and Cadden are okay, but they're nothing to write home about either, and there's questions about their solidity in the centre of the park. But now I'm looking at them and thinking, are you even any good going forward now? Because that's 3 goals scored in the last 4 games. And the last 4 games have not been against good teams.
I think that's a really good... Yeah, I think it's a really, really good point, because the Dundee United game, which I said at the time, and I'll stick with it, I think Hibs marginally deserved to win that match against Dundee United at Easter Road. But some of the talk of their dominance was massively overstated. They had 3 shots on target against a team that were so tired, having played their 8th game in their 3rd game in 8 days with the same players due to the injury crisis they've effectively got. So they just came in and sat in and hoped for the best. Defend, and then hopefully get something on the break at some point. That was their entire tactic. Hibs had 90 minutes to beat that. And they had 3 shots on target. That's not good enough. It's not potent. It's not effective. That's not a team that you can talk about and say, oh, well, once things click going forward, they'll be fit. No, it's poor. And that's something I thought was papering over cracks. There was all the talk about the VAR stuff at the end, which was a total shambles. And again, that would have perhaps helped Hibs win that game. But too much was made of their dominance. They did not... Jack Walton barely had cause to dirty his gloves over the course of that 90 minutes. So, yeah, I think it's amid all the talk of the defensive catastrophe and the goalkeeping signing and all that sort of stuff, you're right to point out Boyle looks a shadow of himself, but among other issues up there. So it's quite, it paints quite a grim picture, because we're now at the stage where enough games have been played that you can stop talking about it being a bad start to the season. You are now in the midst of a bad season. So, at this point, things need to turn fast. Otherwise, you're going into 2025 fighting against relegation.
Yeah, they have to be considered in relegation. Hearts and Hibs both have to be considered in a relegation battle at the moment. You're right, it's no longer just a bad start to the season. It's far more severe than that. And before we move on to St Mirren, I was looking back at the equalising goal that wasn't, and you can actually see Dwight Gale, because it comes off him. And that's why it's disallowed. He's well offside, and it comes off him. He even hits his hand as well.
Yeah. And
as I was looking back at it, you can see Gale, because it hits off him, and immediately you can just tell from his body language, he's like, oh, fuck. And he just he doesn't join in the celebrations. He just kind of walks away, and he's kind of got his head down, and Joe Neo comes up to him, and he must ask, because there's a little conversation between them, and he must ask, did that hit off you?
Yeah.
And he just kind of puts his arm around him. In the meanwhile, everybody's going mental, running up the side of the East Stand.
Given it was so obvious, it still did take a while, didn't it? That's the kind of thing that surprised me. I was like, with these VAR checks that sometimes take longer than you think, you do think to yourself, have I missed something that makes the blatant offside irrelevant or something? But yeah, it was really as obvious as it seemed.
For St Mirren, I think the big thing for this one is McMenamin. Obviously, he got the 2 goals and played very well. But it's more that he's the exact type of player they need, I think, at this point in time. And it's a good wee turnaround for St Mirren, because there was a period where I was starting to worry about them. I think St Mirren fans were starting to worry about them, because they were kind of being a bit un-St Mirren in some games and not really kind of keeping a lot of the ball for possession's sake. And that's kind of not what they've built this success on under Stephen Robinson. But recently they've looked back to themselves, and it's at the point of attack. So for this campaign, Greg Killie was out for a while and has only come back kind of fairly recently. And McMenamin's been out for most of the season. This was his first league start. And the guys they've had in reserve to kind of play those positions in Robinson's preferred 3-4-3 just haven't really cut it so far this season. Aduwu showed some early promise, but he's not really done anything. James Scott has been, after being kind of an early season assist king, has gone back to being the James Scott we've seen any time he's played in Scottish football, apart from that first spell when he was at Motherwell and he came through the ranks and burst onto the scene and looked like a great player. Mandron's not playing well this campaign. Ayunga's still not really found his form after his injury. That was about 18 months ago now, in fact, probably longer than that. So getting Kiltie back, he was a huge player for them last year, and McMenamin, not necessarily the best of players last season. He started off really well, and then his form kind of tailed off, but it was then kind of revealed that he was carrying an injury from most of that. But he had a good game, and if he could come in and just do, and kind of return to the form that he had at the start of last season, where it wasn't really necessarily about goals and assists, it was just about doing things correctly, but doing so in the final third. And then you've got Kiltie with a bit of creativity. Back then it was Mandron, now it's Olasanya who's emerged as their kind of focal point up front. But it just gives them that little bit extra quality, which I think they've been missing so far this campaign, is a lot of the business they did in the summer wasn't that great. And the best bit of business they did do, they've sacked from the club.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think very appropriate what you said there about previous matches feeling a bit un-St Mirren, because that's exactly the feeling that I got of the two most recent 90 minutes that I'd seen were obviously when United won 1-0 there and when they lost to Hearts. And on both occasions you looked at that team and thought, it doesn't look like a St Mirren team. Against United, even in shape-wise, it didn't look like a St Mirren team. They played a sort of 4-2-3-1 and it just fundamentally did not work at all. And they were a bit powder puff. And you're thinking to yourself, powder puff? Really, St Mirren? And while the guys you've listed there undoubtedly gave them more potency and gave them more creativity, the thing that I would be most excited about were just how effective and good that I thought Killie and Phillips and Mark O'Hara were in the centre of that pitch.
It's a midfield two to like, because they're both kind of similar players, but in a 3-4-3, I think they're just about ideal for that position. If you're a club like St Mirren, because they're both very good at they're both vertical players. I think it's fair to say, both getting up and down, both can disrupt, but also get forward and get on the end of things.
Yeah, well, between them, they won possession 11 times over the course of that match. So they're stopping momentum. They're getting the ball back. And Mark O'Hara in particular, they've got somebody who can pick out a dangerous pass or get into the final third. And I think getting the best out of those two will ensure that whoever else is performing well, whoever else is doing okay, they will continue to be more of the St Mirren that we've become accustomed to. Horrible to play against in the centre of the park. Horrible to try and get any momentum against, because they've got guys in there breaking things up. So, yeah, I think, talking about the business done in the summer, I think Killie and Phillips over the course of this season, given I think he was in a wee bit later than the rest of them, if I recall correctly. I think once he is, properly, and he probably is now embedded in this team and building momentum, I think you could see the best of him, because when he first initially came up here, I think there was a feeling he might do okay. He had something, but obviously didn't really set the heather alight. He looks like he's come back up and ready for a really good spell at St Mirren. I thought he was maybe my standout at Easter Road.
Right, let's move on to our third match, and that was the later game on Saturday evening. Aberdeen defeating Dundee by 4-1 and bouncing back to winning ways immediately after that League Cup semi-final hammering by Celtic. They moved top of the table on Saturday night by themselves. Celtic pulled that back. Probably a little fortunate to actually do so, and we'll get to that soon enough. But yeah, showing no effects of that trouncing they took at Hampden. It was 0-0 at half-time in this one. They were a little fortunate to keep it at 0-0, I think it has to be said. Aberdeen were not good in the first half in this game, and Dundee, they still, to be fair to Aberdeen, they still had some chances in that opening period, but it was far from their best that we've seen under Jimmy Thielen so far this season. They could go a goal down. Simon Murray from the penalty spot, he misses. Dimitar Mitov makes the save. Come back to that in just a quick second. And then they go on to win the match. Goals from Ante Palaversa and Toby Keskinen give them a kind of quick 1-2 punch, which put them 2-0 ahead. Simon Murray got Dundee back into it. And just when you're thinking, well, this could be a nervy last 20 minutes. Let's test Aberdeen's mettle here. Right away, they get a goal. The substitutes combining brilliantly. Having just come on the park, Kevin Nisbet with quick thinking, a free kick in the middle of the park. He plays an excellent through ball for Vicente Bisayan to go through and finished calmly. And then Nisbet himself made sure of the 3 points. Well, if it hadn't already been done by then, because it was 7 minutes in injury time, and that put them 3 goals ahead. So yeah, probably a better way of putting that was that it put the cherry on top of the victory. And Aberdeen, yep, just keep on winning. And I think this one shows. Actually, do you know what, Alan? I'll start with this before I come off to. I'll start with a moan before I come off to talk more about Aberdeen's strength and depth. I've asked this numerous times on the podcast so far this season. You are a man who shares an office with Sean Hamilton and Eric Nicholson, the St Johnstone followers at the Courier. What the fuck happened? Why did St Johnstone sell Dimitar Mitov to Aberdeen for 300 grand? Why was this allowed to happen? I want investigations into this.
I think the simple answer is Dimitar Mitov wouldn't have joined St Johnstone without the release clause that subsequently...
Is that what it was? Was it a release clause?
That subsequently was triggered by Aberdeen.
That release clause was only 300 grand. Fuck's sake.
Do you know what? I honestly don't know. I've not actually paid enough attention to that aspect of it to know what the release clause was. I don't know if it's ever been made public.
I think that's a rumoured fee for a 27-year-old goalie who's now the Bulgarian number 1. I mean, what are Aberdeen going to make off him now if they sell him? Like, at least, 5 million.
I guess St Johnstone's only gripe would be, how that release clause getting out there, I suppose, to Aberdeen. But I guess when St Johnstone's goalkeeping coach moves to Aberdeen.
Oh, yeah. Right. Get us investigated. Get them docked points. Preferably 50.
It's all fair in love and football. But it's either way, it was regardless. The release clause could have been 1.5 million quid. It's still been a steal. He's that good.
Yes.
His particularly from penalties, which in the VAR era, see if you've got a keeper that can save penalties, like talk about marginal gains, that over the course of the season is going to be important. Penalties have never been given for less than they are in modern football. So he's a top keeper. And to be fair, if we recall at the time, St Johnstone got him ahead of some teams down south. There were League One teams in England that wanted Dimitar Berbatov. I think he'd been flying with Cambridge. This wasn't some unknown...
Dimitar Mitov, you just called him Dimitar Berbatov.
So, God, I love Dimitar Berbatov. I think, it's because on that, how random goals pop up on your Twitter feed? That one where he lobs it in from the angle for Monaco, just sort of nonchalantly flicks it over the keeper into the far post, and then sort of... Anywho, Dimitar Mitov, he's... I think... the only reason, as I say, St Johnstone would have got him up the road is the platform that they were affording him to go out and perform. And that a player's well within his rights to say, well, I can't just take your word for it that you're going to give me a platform to perform and then move on. Let's have something set in stone in terms of a fee. So if that fee was as low as 300 grand, then so be it. I mean, listen, did St Johnstone make the profit they should have if that was the fee? No. Did they still make a healthy profit on a free transfer? Yeah. Yes. So it's it's not terrible business, but Aberdeen have absolutely won a watch.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, to heap further praise on Aberdeen, I think a game like this, it kind of showed what they're really good at, which is when they do get their tails up. I think the hardest thing for them in some games is to get that opening goal, but once they have that opening goal, it just creates a bit more space for these attacking players, and they've now got so many attacking players now who are in form and can do something. Like, they really are spoiled for choice when you're bringing Bazai, Nisbet and Morris off the bench. Two of those guys, if you'd said that this time last year, anybody would have laughed at you. I mean, Bazai, I don't know if he was still on loan at the time, but Morris was certainly not somebody that Aberdeen fans looked upon if he was coming off the substitutes bench and going, oh, good, he could turn a game. But he's doing it. Like, Keskinen is a good attacker. Duke, back now involved, back to his kind of, not quite at his very best as he was at the kind of second half of his first season, but he's certainly looking a lot closer to that. Leighton Clarkson getting kind of rare start after he, previously was the kind of man at Aberdeen. Sockler doing a lot of running up top. And they're now just spoiled for choice going forward. And like I say, when they get that, when space opens up a little bit more because they go in front, and obviously to go along with that as well. They have a bit of confidence, a bit of adrenaline, momentum, all pumping through them. They could be a really scary team to try and defend, and you can see that on Saturday where they just kind of, in that second half, just kind of kept going at Dundee and ultimately got the reward for it.
It has to be said, though, some of the goals from a Dundee perspective, because I guess we always need to remember that there are two teams involved in every goal. That's just a horror show. Again, horror show after horror show for Dundee. And we're at the point now where only St Johnstone have conceded more league goals than Dundee. They're averaging 2 a game, and despite the fact that this gets brought up now more consistently, and it's now something that the manager talks about having to eradicate individual errors, and the players are talking about how we know we can defend better and we need to get back to it. Some of the goals in that Aberdeen game were as bad as they've been. The lack of decisiveness and aggression for Palaversa's goal to allow that ball to bobble about, and then in a crowded box, nobody throws themselves in front of it. Just really, really poor reactions. Keskinen shouldn't be allowed to get goal side as easy as he does. And then I think if I were a Dundee fan, it's the goal for the third goal, I should say. That would have absolutely drove me mental. It's because you've just got back into the game. You need to keep things tight. You need to get a foothold in the game. And you talk about Nisbet's quick thinking. It was relatively quick thinking, but he didn't put the ball down and immediately kick with the same movement. He put the ball down, had a look, shaped, and in that time, nobody stepped across him to block the quick free kick. Now you go down the road and watch Spartans or Bonnyrigg, or go down to the amateur ranks. See if somebody tries to take a free kick quickly, someone will step in front of him. It is so Sunday League. And Nisbet was allowed to, you see him shaping the pass. And lovely ball, lovely finish. But there are so many aspects of every goal Dundee seem to concede that are avoidable. And they're going to need to find an answer to that quick, because they can be as nice as they like going forward. But if you concede 2 goals a game, you're going to be in a relegation battle, because they might be good going forward, but they're not 3 goals a game good. So that's something that desperately needs remedied, because I keep hearing about how well they're playing. And this goes across football. It's one of my pet hates when you hear about teams that are playing well but losing, as if not conceding goals isn't part of playing well. There's, I get that football's subjective, but there is a purpose to the sport, and not conceding goals is playing the sport well. And I'm afraid you can't say Dundee are playing well in any shape or form if they're conceding 2 goals a game.
It has to be a thing that you point the finger of blame at the manager, I would say, by this point, because Tony Docherty overall has done a good job at Dundee, and they are good to watch. And I don't want to be too critical on a guy that makes a team decent, especially in my position when I'm having to watch most Dundee games or I already know the score. It's good that I'm watching back these matches and it's a team that are fun. But at the same time, how many different combinations has there been in defence? How many, even this season, they've gone between the back 3 and the back 4 as they had at the weekend. They've even got Mo Silla, one of the best kind of defensive midfielders, pure defensive midfielders, pure stoppers in the league, and protecting that back 4. And yet they just ship so many goals, and they're just bad defensively as a team. And when a team's bad defensively, you kind of have to say well, what's the manager doing about this? And I don't think he's not under any pressure.
No, and he shouldn't be. And he shouldn't be at this point.
He's not under any pressure, but I think it is about, it's now gone on long enough though that Dundee fans and we're asking the question as well, why can your teams not defend? You don't even have to be that much better. You tighten it up a wee bit and your abilities going forward will mean you will be a more successful side.
The balance.
The joke last season was the amount of times the drop points have been 2 goals up, and it's not really changed.
Yeah, the balance isn't right for me, and it's interesting the point you make about Mo Silla, and I do like him a lot, but how often is he sort of put there to just be a sort of finger in the dam? He's only one man. His football pitches are awfully big, and Mo Silla can be as mobile and as effective as he wants, but I think sometimes he's left to do a little bit too much on his own. And, I'm not suggesting that Tony Docherty suddenly doesn't become an attack-minded manager, because that would be a betrayal of, his principles. It's right that he wants to play the way he wants to play, but he needs to he just needs to make sure they're more secure on turnovers and have players, defensively in the right areas when they're not in possession, because right now what they're doing out of possession is completely betraying some of the nice stuff that they do while in possession.
For Aberdeen, I think if you're looking at them sustaining this title race, or if you think that's too ambitious, because it's a kind of quite a dominant Celtic team, to win a title in this era of Scottish football, you need both Celtic and Rangers to have really bad seasons and to have a kind of historic one yourself. So it's still very very unlikely. But I think we're starting to look at this more and more and thinking Aberdeen could definitely finish second in this league. And
without a shadow of a doubt.
Especially if things continue as they are at Ibrox, something really needs to change, and we'll get to that soon enough. But as I kind of talked about there, how much quality they've got going forward and the options they can bring off the bench and how these options manage to make an impact just about any time they do come off the bench. In defence, they are a little bit thin. And I would be a little bit concerned about Gavin Malloy recently. He was such a great story at the start of the campaign. He obviously signed from Ireland, kind of quite unknown, goes right into the team. He doesn't look like a centre-half. He looks quite undersized. He's just got the general appearance of like a diminutive, hardworking midfielder who, makes 11 starts a season and 18 bench appearances for like a Dundee or something. But he was playing very well at centre-half. Recently, though, he has been making and I actually think overall against Dundee on Saturday, he played well. But it was a terrible decision for the penalty, and he's had them just about once a game in the last 4, 5, 6 matches. And there's not really many options behind him because he's the kind of ball playing of the two of them, and him and Rubezic. So if you take him out, your only really other option is Jack Milne, bit young, can't really be relied on, or Angus MacDonald, probably a bit too similar to Rubezic. So that's a little bit of concern at his form, because if these mistakes continue, there's a lack of options there for what Jimmy Thielen could do.
I certainly think when you look at the depth that they've got in attack and midfield, there is a discrepancy in terms of what they've got at the back. I think that's absolutely fair, and I've not seen enough of Malloy, and most of all, I don't think Aberdeen's defence has been tested enough, and that's not me giving the old take of they've not played anyone before Aberdeen fans get up in arms about that. That's me just saying that Shinnie and Nilsson do a really good job of protecting the centre halves for the most part, that I don't think they've been forced to do lots and lots and lots of one-on-one defending where you can make those sorts of errors like we saw in the Simon Murray situation in the Dundee game. So in terms of Malloy individually, I wouldn't like to say whether he's up to it or the answer for the long term or that, but certainly in terms of putting pressure on him for a place, which is always healthy to get the best out of anyone, I don't see loads of options there. And I also think that at some point through December, through January, the Jack McKenzie situation, contract situation, will also become something that becomes a talking point, regardless of what decision he makes. I'm quite sure he'll try to be as professional as possible, but these are human beings. There could be little distractions there, or worst case scenario, he might actively look to get something tied up elsewhere, which puts question marks over him. So I would like to see, I don't know if maybe a left-sided defender who can also play left back, or just a little bit more competition in left backs as Milnet. I don't know, but it's a bit of a snuffy big question. So
could use Liam Scales back.
Exactly. So I think a bit of depth defensively, I think is a fair point, because beyond that, the thing that, and I won't labour it because you have touched on it, but the thing that most impresses me is Jimmy Thielen's use of his depth. I think he makes fabulous substitutions and employs them in such a way that they get on the pitch and know exactly what they've been asked to do and do it immediately. And I think he's a wonderfully proactive manager. I really, really like that about him.
Right, let's move on to our fourth match, which was the game that took place, the earlier match on Sunday, which was Kilmarnock 0, Celtic 2, Callum McGregor and Nicholas Kuhn with the goals, but that didn't really tell the story. This was one of those very frustrating encounters, frustrating for probably everybody watching, if you're not a Celtic fan, or if you particularly don't like Kilmarnock and don't want them to do well, because Killie had the opportunities to win this game and didn't take those opportunities, and Celtic's I mean, the 2 goals, actually, I would say. Second goal is quite easy, where it's just far too simple for Kuhn to kind of get down that side and to ultimately score. But the opener with Callum McGregor, it's a great cross, to be fair. It's one of those ones where you put it into an area, is the forward going to get it? And if he doesn't, then it could sneak in at the back post, and that's ultimately what happened. But to lose a goal like that 4 minutes into stoppage time at the end of the half, when you've been the better team and created the better chances, and then again at the start of the second half, they're putting them under pressure, they're getting chances, they're not taking them. Celtic get the second. So frustrating if you're a Killie supporter or a Rangers fan or an Aberdeen fan.
Yeah, I mean, 18 shots and 2.33 XG from Kilmarnock. That is a performance that I don't think I've covered a Dundee United game where Dundee United have more than 2 XG. And that's what Kilmarnock are putting up against Celtic and somehow don't manage to score. That's the only downside to this, because the goals aren't great, but in the pantheon of catastrophes I've seen this season from various teams, they're not that bad. You know, how that McGregor opener it's maddening. It's really frustrating, but you see that goal a million times. Like,
there's not much that Killie could actually do about it. I think people
exactly.
There's some easy blame on the people who do with the goalie, but what can the goalie actually do? Because he has to, like, he knows that Ida's there. He's going to be impossible for him to judge, because Ida's not far away from it. It's going to be impossible for it to judge. And like, say he goes and stands at the post and waits for the ball to arrive. Yeah. Well, Ida would just be left to tapping if he managed to get there. So I don't think it's McCrory's fault.
No, those people have never played in goals and know nothing about goalkeeping. That's absolutely. If he puts in a ball that's ostensibly undefendable and it happens to, nestle in the corner, that just sometimes happens. We see it all the time. So the only disappointment are, the fact that they conceded a couple of goals, but more than that, those big chances, the Marley Watkins, and that skips just wide. I've never known a shot in real time that I was so convinced was a goal. And even in the stadium, you hear the roar and then realise that it's zipped wide. And then there's an angle of it just alongside the post. And as it kicks off the turf, it takes a wee spin to, zip it just narrowly wide of the post. So he's done everything right there. And I was really, really, really impressed with Kilmarnock. I thought, there's a stereotype about them, and to be fair, they were strong, physical, hard working. They were all that good stuff that Derek McInnes' team is. But I thought they were really brave against Celtic as well. That chance I'm alluding to, they won the ball really high up the pitch for that opportunity before working that opportunity, and all through the game they got in Celtic's faces. Now I've watched the team I cover defend well, but it's generally done via sort of low block tactic. Kilmarnock have clearly gone, well, if we do that, Celtic will eventually score, because they are that good. So they were brave enough that at the right portions in matches with the right trigger points, they actually got in Celtic's faces, and on a couple of occasions nicked possession of them and took advantage of the fact that Celtic had a properly gruelling game in midweek. So that was bright, and loads and loads to like about Kilmarnock. Lots to convince me that Kilmarnock will be absolutely fine and probably be challenging towards the top 6 this season. The only shame for them, the only downside, and it's daft to say that this is the only downside because it's the only thing that matters, of course, is that they've left with no points. Yeah,
you're right. I think Killie, results haven't been great this season, but Europe took a massive toll on them. Yeah. I think the last campaign they were maybe a wee bit fortunate in terms of injuries and they didn't have too many. This campaign's been a little bit of a different story. And even at halftime in this one, Kyle Vassell having to go off at the break with an injury. But Innes Cameron coming on, and not somebody that we've ever really been particularly impressed by the Terrace, but he had one of his best 45-minute performances in a Killie strip. If that's something that he could do more often, then that would be huge for Killie, to get somebody else other than Vassell who could be that focal point, that battering ram up front. But the thing that really stood out for me with Killie, so the game starts and you've got Corey and Daba playing at centre-half and Robbie D's playing at left-back. And you're like, well, what's happening there? Because that's surely the other way around. But Daba was given what I could only really describe as a free role for a centre-half. He just was allowed it whenever he wanted to step out, whether that was stepping out to put pressure on the ball and to try and win the ball back, which he did a few times, or just to step out and basically join the midfield as he's been doing recently, but been doing from left back. And then whenever he would do that, Dees would slide over, Mayo would tuck in. He didn't really get forward that often. Brad Lyons would kind of tuck in as well, and they would just make their team. Brad Lyons would go a bit more wide, and they would make their team like a 3-5-2 whenever Ndaba did that. But it was a tactic that worked very well. Celtic looked like they weren't really ready for it, and Ndaba himself had a brilliant game.
Yeah. I mean, actually unlucky not to. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily unlucky not to score because Schmeichel makes saves that he should make, but yeah, I mean, it was genuinely a goal threat despite where he ostensibly seemed to be lining up on the pitch. So again, really creative and brave management from Derek McInnes, and I think he's come out of this with a lot of credit. And I mean, it's a funny one, this, because I can almost feel like Celtic supporters, and kind of understandably, shouting at their devices and saying, did we not win the match 2-0? And I guess that's the problem when you do have a Celtic side that is so dominant that victories do become commonplace and almost not noteworthy. So well done to them for keeping another clean sheet. Schmeichel played well, and all that good stuff.
If we want to do the positives for Celtic, Schmeichel with probably his best performance of the season. Trusty, I think, is beginning to when he first went into the side, I wasn't sure about him, but obviously that was just a case of him kind of finding his feet. He's looking a lot more steadier now, and that's great for Celtic, especially with Cameron Carter-Vickers' kind of fitness issues being a kind of theme of the season. Nicholas Kuhn is continuing to just be ridiculous so far this season.
Yeah.
I can't remember the stat was, like the number of goals and assists he's had so far this campaign. I've forgotten what it was off the top of my head, but it's something like 17 or something like that. Like ridiculous. Like we're only in November. But there was a few things here to be concerned about, and mainly the performance of two players who combined cost £20 million, and that's Adam Ida and Arnie Engels. Ida, again, it was one of those showings that have been commonplace for him ever since he signed on loan initially in January, and that he has come up in big moments and he scored some big goals for them. But there are games where his touch is off, where he can't really lead the line, and then he's not doing much to impact the scoreline, and you're thinking, really? For that amount of money for this guy? Like, you kind of, all along it felt like Celtic were kind of the kind of romantic side of it. An Irish boy, Celtic fan growing up, scored the winner against Rangers in the Scottish Cup final, scored another kind of big goals as Celtic retook the title race back from Rangers. But was he ever worth that amount of money? I think we all thought at the time, no. And performances like this, the fact that he's not really Celtic's first choice, and Kyogo came off the bench and done a better job at the things that Adam Ida's supposed to be good at, in terms of holding the ball up and being that focal point at the top of the attack. That's a bit... I don't know how much of a concern it is, but if you're spending that much money, I think you would want more from your centre forward.
The interesting thing...
Sorry, you talk about then, we'll talk about Engels in a second.
I just think the interesting thing about that is the fact that it's not really that much different from last season. Like, he had quite a few performances like that last season against, in inverted commas, the smaller sides. But like you allude to, on big moments and big matches, he did have a really happy tendency of, putting his best foot forward. And does that make you a £10 million player? I don't think so. But then again, I think to an extent, I guess you're maybe paying a premium for potential, which is what they've clearly done. For example, he says transitioning over to the Engels point, because but what I would say is I look at Engels' pedigree and his previous performances and what looks to be his ceiling, according to most people that know about him. And you would say that's a safer bet to be spending a lot of money on than Adam Ida, which is a ceiling that may exist in future. But it's a... Yeah, I would suggest if you were going to force you into a corner, you would say that they've overpaid somewhat with a fee that's knocking on the door of £10 million for Kyogo's backup.
Yeah, Engels, I can definitely see it more with him. Like, I think he has had games where he struggled since signing for Celtic, but those struggles so far to me look like it's a player, certainly in this game, it's a player still adapting to life in the Scottish top flight. I think Kilmarnock were just a bit too aggressive for him at this point in his Celtic career. It's something he's going to have to pick up very quickly. And I think he's lucky to still be getting a game pretty much every single match, because Luke McCowan and Pillow Bernardo so far this season have looked better than him. But Celtic are obviously going to give him every opportunity with that price tag, and as well they should. That's what you do when you put that outlay on a 21-year-old. You have to give him the time to learn, and there is certainly things. There's more I think to like about him overall. But you're right, Weeda. I think we do forget he is still 23 years old, so there is there is improvement that they would hope to come.
Yeah,
but
I think
like you say though, like as you said though, you're just not seeing much difference between this season and the last one.
The thing with Engels as well is I've actually seen, to be honest, I've seen Celtic supporters be more harsh on their assessments than most neutral onlookers have been. I've seen quite a lot of, Luke McCowan needs to be in this team ahead of Engels. What's he offering for that price tag and that sort of thing? And I'm kind of a little bit surprised, and I'm aware that social media has a bit of an echo chamber, so I'm quite sure that that's not the majority view. But given Nicholas Kuhn's trajectory, I'm kind of amazed that we've got another season where a player's coming in for abroad, taking a bit of time to hit the ground running. And I remember some of the assessments from Nicholas Kuhn from his opening few games. And to be honest, I thought much the same. I didn't think he was up to much at all. And now you look at him after a pre-season under his belt, knowing exactly what the league's going to be like, getting to know his teammates, all that good stuff. And he's a totally different player and will go on and make Celtic lots and lots of money very soon. And I would fully expect Arne Engels to be similar once he's got his bearings. This is a boy that's got all the pedigree in the world, got a hell of a lot of good coaches from previous clubs vouching for him as something a little bit special. But sometimes we can underestimate in this country how different the style of football is from other countries. It's not as technically demanding. You probably don't need to be as good a player technically. However, it's really, really fast. And see, if you're a player like him who is very effective at picking up pockets and playing killer passes, where are those pockets in Scottish football? You need to get used to it. You need to find them.
Where's the passing lanes?
Exactly that, but that's exactly it. And I think once he gets accustomed to the dangerous areas he can play in and how much defensive work he needs to do, and when he receives possession, just how much is he going to need to protect the ball before he can then be progressive with it without risking, giving the ball away. I think once he's got all that down, then you'll see a different player. But you can't be expecting tidy, talented technical players coming from European leagues to immediately hit the ground running in what Scottish football is, because when you're a Celtic player, you're basically faced with, it wasn't the case on Sunday to Kilmarnock's credit, but generally you're faced with two lines of five and teams standing there saying, right, break us down. If you're a player that likes to play in the pockets of space, where are they in that challenge? So lots to learn, but I fully expect, just like Nicholas Kuhn's trajectory, but once he gets settled in, he'll be a top player.
Right, let's move on to our penultimate game, which was the match between Motherwell and St Johnstone on Saturday afternoon. Motherwell winning this by 2-1. Tawanda Masher... Fuck's sake. I actually tried this earlier and got it right, and then I fucked it again. Right. Tawanda Maswanize opened the scoring. Tom Sparrow got the second before half-time. St Johnstone got back into it with a Nicky Clark penalty after Andy Halliday was adjudged to have handled the ball. It looked like St Johnstone had managed to get themselves a point in injury time with Jack Sanders scoring, but replays showed that he had basically volleyballed it into the back of the net. So that was disallowed for handball.
And still celebrated.
Yeah, I know. He did not Dwight Gale it. He was like, I'm going to need, if there's any chance of them letting this count, I'm going to need to sell this.
Yeah, incredible.
So yeah, St Johnstone with a defeat, and that means that Saints now have lost the last 3 games, and I think there's a little bit of concern there for St Johnstone, because they looked immediately improved when you saw that Valakari had put his stamp on the team. I don't think he was officially manager for that first game because the paperwork didn't come through, but the shape was changed. The shape was much different. The approach was much different, and immediately they looked like a much better side. I think the problem they've had in the last couple of games, which is it's a small sample size, but it's a bit of concern, is that the defence is still terrible. It's been terrible all season, and it remains bad. You can see for this one, just the goals they conceded were just too simple. And they were also lucky in a couple of moments where Maswanizi going through on the counter-attack and either taking a bad touch as he did in one instance or picking the wrong option as he did in another. But I thought, right, this is... If you're a team that's a bad defence, you can't do anything about it till January. Although they have brought in Bozo Mikulic, who did come off the bench in this one. He might improve them. But if they are going to struggle still defensively, and the goalkeeper's another bit of a concern with this team, then they could possibly outscore opponents because they do have very good forwards in Sidibe and Kimpioka. Christ, my pronunciations are all over the shop today. But in the last two matches, for all the possession they've had, home to Hearts, away in this one, I think they've struggled to create chances off the back of it. Yes. And like I say, that's like 67% possession away from home. But I can't really think of many kind of clear-cut opportunities that they did create. They had a number of kind of half chances, but they're still struggling to create a bit. And I think that also kind of comes from some kind of lack of options and creativity in midfield as well. So a little thing to be concerned about for St Johnstone, but what do you make of how they've changed since Valakari's come in?
I think they look like a team that tells me that Simo Valakari is a fine coach, but isn't a wizard. He's until January comes, and hopefully he's backed by the new board. He's not going to have a new goalkeeper. He's not going to have a new defence. He's not going to have a midfield that wasn't shaped in the image of Craig Levein. So these are all things that are working against him quite badly. Effectively, Craig Levein had set up a team to be stoic and hard to break down and shell the ball up to his two insanely quick strikers and hope for the best. And I mean, towards the tail end of last season, there were moments where that kind of actually looked like not a bad strategy. Now they are clearly a more coherent football team. They play some nice stuff. They have some decent shapes. They do. I noticed this at Dens Park. Didn't create loads of great chances, but they were having pops on goal. You know, they were at least trying to do something to enliven the fans, have a few efforts from distance, that sort of thing. That's not continued quite to the same extent in recent games, but you know, there was a certain desire to at least enliven the supporters, which is something that they desperately needed after the Craig Levein reign. But I go back to it. I've seen it with the team that I cover. If you don't have a good senior cam goalkeeper, there's a fair chance you might get relegated. And the good thing for St Johnstone is that probably applies just as much to Hibs as it applies to St Johnstone at this point. Probably more, to be fair to Ross Sinclair and Josh Ray. But I don't think either of them are St Johnstone number ones. And I think that goes back to, again, a criticism of Craig Levein's time there, because while Aberdeen might have pinched Mitov, they at least had the good grace to do it relatively early in the window. And St Johnstone should have brought in a replacement for Dimitar Mitov, not a project goalkeeper in Josh Ray, who had done his best work with his feet at Airdrie, rather than ever really impressing that much as a shot stopper or on crosses. So the goalkeeping situation bothers me. I don't think the centre halves are good. Mikulic needs to go into the team as quickly as possible, and you need to hope that, he certainly looks and has the name of a good centre back. He scans in that regard. I've never seen him kick a ball, but a big hulking guy called Bozo it certainly seems like what St Johnstone need. So hopefully he can make some sort of difference. But fundamentally, it's going to be a really, really big January. It's going to be a fascinating January across the board, I tell you, because there's a lot of teams, some that you expect down there, some that you don't expect down there, and all of them will be going into January with the same, importance of strengthening in certain areas. And whoever gets that right, that might be what defines their survival more than anything we're seeing right now. But I definitely have seen enough from Simo Valakari to suggest that he's a decent coach, and he's done. I think he's changed quite a lot in a short period of time. But I want to, churn out terrible cliches. That the hardest thing is taking that nice football and turning it into goals. And I think when the squad is more shaped in his image, I think you might see better.
I think to look at Motherwell, so going into the campaign, I think a lot of us could have looked at them and thought that's maybe the third worst team in the league, and that's them now 10 points already, clear of the relegation places. I don't know how they're quite doing it. Every time I watch Motherwell, I'm not really that impressed, but they're racking up the wins, and fair play to them. I'm not entirely sure how, but, well, this last game, I would say they managed to do it, I think, because, well, they are kind of set up that they're quite good defensively and that they don't really beat themselves, and they seem to, and this goes on to the wider point I was going to make about the team in general, they seem to have a kind of decent kind of next man up thing going on, because they've had so many injury problems this season. I mean, they went into the campaign with real injury problems with a number of guys missing long-term, Slattery, Nicholson, Payton, who just came back for this one. But as it's gone on, it's not really got much better, and it was the defence that was kind of hit prior to this one, with McGinn out, O'Donnell out, Gordon out. So I mean, you can make an argument that's a starting back three for them. I mean, Casey would probably be in that, but you could say like McGinn could play on the left of that, and O'Donnell could play on the right, especially with Coletta emerging as a very good option at right wing back. But they just like the defence played quite well in this one. The centre halves, the Tom Sparrow, somebody we've not seen. I've only seen kind of bits and pieces so far this year. I was impressed with him in the middle of the park. As I mentioned, Coletta, he's got real kind of directness about him, big, direct, can really works very hard up and down that right hand side. Obviously got the assist for the opening goal. And Mazwarizi, he's been I would say probably a little bit inconsistent so far, but there's undoubtedly something about him, and he provides something different at the top of that attack, and it is certainly a threat, and is a threat in a way that many of their other forwards haven't shown enough of so far this year. But it's just it just seems like a collective Motherwell. They've got so many players, I think, who are of the similar ability, which is something I really quite dislike about the Scottish top flight in general, is that too many teams have that. But fair play to them, because it's getting them results. Because, as I said, 19 points now so far this campaign, and Hearts are in 11th with 9. So it already kind of feels like any proper fear that Motherwell were going to be in a relegation battle were wide of the mark. But let's see, it's still early in the campaign, and things obviously might change if the January transfer window comes and Lennon Miller is sold. You got anything to say, Motherwell? We'll just move on.
Motherwell. Sorry, I thought you were doing a slick transition there. My bad.
No. Lennon Miller didn't actually have his best of games in this one. He was all right, but he didn't have his best of games, so I didn't really want to say too much more about him.
Poor kid's probably knackered. He's played a hell of a lot of football for a young player, but yeah, I think I would pinpoint would be I like Kettlewell's eye for a player. I think Mazwanizi is a get your fans on their feet player. I thought he was really dangerous at Tannadice with his 2 goals, and just generally spooks defenders because he's fearless, runs at you, real pace, a couple of nice finishes as well. And Coletta looks to be another very, very decent player. And when you ally that to the fact that he's shown faith in young players, I think there's actually quite a lot to like about the job that Kettlewell's doing, because cards on the table, I thought there'd been a relegation battle at the start of the season when I looked just at their squad, and they've shoved that right in my face. So, absolutely fair play to them.
Right, let's move on to our final game, which took place at Ibrox on Sunday evening. Rangers beating Hearts by 1-0, the only goal of the game coming in 6 minutes from Cyril Dessers. Alan, petition to get all games that take place on a Sunday evening banned. Not allowed from now on. Shouldn't happen. Nobody can be arsed.
Games involving Hearts and Rangers banned. Which was just for two of our nation's biggest clubs, I thought the standard was woeful. Absolutely woeful. The amount of attacks and dangerous moments that started with one team playing a simple pass to the other team, I thought was absolutely staggering. Good technical footballers, it's just like turnover after turnover after turnover. It was, I thought the standard was woeful, and that includes Hearts, by the way. Hearts were probably the better team in terms of especially in the second half, in terms of the football on show, and should have taken something from the game. But Hearts can play better than that. They can look after the football a lot better than they did for the course of that game. But you can see why Rangers fans are kind of going tonto at this point, because there is no impetus or urgency or incisiveness or identity. I don't really know how they're supposed to be playing, and the sloppiness that was on show I just thought was absolutely unforgivable. Conor Barron played pretty well, but as has been the case for an awful lot of this season, he's getting herograms for pretty standard midfield stuff. Like, he is, like, I'm sorry, but he's not like, this isn't like Matt O'Reilly or something. Like, he's not ripping up the division. He's being a competent, progressive midfield player, the sort that Rangers should always have in their midfield, and he's standing out because of the performances of some others around him. I just thought Rangers were incredibly lucky to escape that. If they've basically escaped that game with 3 points, cause Kenneth Vargas. So there's a real, I think, an incredibly unsatisfactory win for Rangers, and Hearts will be left thinking probably just they'll never win at Ibrox ever again, because that was probably the chance.
So you mentioned Barron. Him and Raskin, I think at this point in time, are about Jeffy to a lesser extent, but still not really sold on him defensively. Going forward, he does something, but going back the way, not so much. But Raskin and Barron kind of struck up a decent partnership. There's a bit of balance there. But even then, like, they seem to work their best with Diamandi in front of them. Diamandi's not a number 10. He just works better, I think, in that trio than Lawrence does. Then that kind of limits their effectiveness in the final third.
Diamandi's not enough of a goal threat.
Yeah, he's not enough of a goal threat. And then you look at the kind of Cyril Dessers. He is what he is. We've talked to death about Dessers. But then you look out wide as well. Czerny is somebody that gets on the ball an awful lot, doesn't do enough with it. Bajrami is somebody that probably doesn't get on the ball often enough, and has a bit more quality about him, I think we could see from his early career at Rangers. But also, like I said, basically, I don't know if he goes hiding or he just doesn't make himself available more, or it's more about the fact that playing on the left doesn't really suit him, but Rangers are lacking bodies out there due to some injury problems, and guys just not being good enough to start for them week in, week out. So, but at the same time, Clement, the questions still have to be asked of Clement. Well, also, he signed these players, so certainly questions have to be asked of them, but there's still better talent out there than what they're showing, and it's go back to what you said about kind of the lack of urgency about their play. Like, they go up early in this one, and for the first 10-15 minutes, they've got Hearts penned in, and you think, God, this could be a doing. And they just don't really do anything with it. Like, Rangers had 20 shots, but only had 4 on target, and hit the post late on. Had, I think, another amount of chance in the first half, but again, just not enough creation of opportunities. And even Hearts missed a couple of big chances, Kenneth Vargas having both of them. But even then, for all Hearts, like, Hearts had nearly equal possession with Rangers at Ibrox. Only had 4 shots, none on target. Still not good enough. Yeah.
The thing about, it's the fact that it becomes so one-dimensional, this Rangers team, because you're listing these wide players that are talented boys, but they all want to come inside. So you end up with this sort of logjam in the middle of the pitch, which asks an awful lot of your fullbacks to provide all the width. And I think Shefty, as you touch upon there, I think he's actually benefiting from it. Tavernier, it's going to run him into the ground, frankly. I mean, I feel a little bit sorry for him, because of course there's a natural decline. The role he's been asked to do for the last however many years is astonishing. It's like he's played right back but been the main attacking threat in a team for about 6 years. Like, so yeah, I do feel incredibly sorry for him at times, some of the stick that he gets. But it's not incisive enough. It's not inventive enough. It's too slow, and I think there's a reason why Rangers sometimes look at their best in Europe. You'll hear people say, why can they not turn in that sort of performance that they did, over in Greece, when they played domestic. It's because the football suits them more, because it is more tactical. It is more of a contest between the respective coaches about finding little gaps and you go. Whereas up here, we touched on it earlier. It's hear 'em, scare 'em. It's a lot. It's fast. There's not a lot of gaps. You need to play your football quickly, get the ball into dangerous areas, transition it into the box, get your shot away. Rangers want to tap it sideways and gradually get it through the lines, and before you know it, it's a 17 pass move, and the other team have 8 players in their own. In their own third. So I just don't. It feels almost like Rangers have appointed now a series of managers / head coaches who all are far more suited to European style football than domestic football. Whereas Celtic, for example, went out and got Ange Postecoglou, who, for all his faults, perfect for Scottish football. That's how you need to play. If Rangers, one bit of advice, the next time they do make a managerial change, go out and find yourself a sort of, to use that horrible cliche, that sort of like heavy metal football style. Go find a manager like that who will, use the superior talent that a club like Rangers can afford and turn that into quick, incisive, persistent, incessant attacking. Because that's what Celtic do, and it's what Rangers absolutely don't do. Hell, it's what Aberdeen are doing. I mean, that's probably the scariest thing about Rangers is they go up to Pittodrie and they play against an Aberdeen team that play like Rangers should play, which is have pace in wide areas, be direct, get the ball into the final third quickly, get balls into the box, cause havoc that way. It's no brain surgery. This isn't the best league in the world. It's the Scottish Premiership. So they've beaten Hearts at Ibrox, but there's way more to worry Rangers than there is to be heartened about, for in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly. I'm fed up of talking about Hearts, so I'm just going to say 3 very quick things before we finish. 1, Kai Rolls, as usual. I thought he was dreadful last week against St Johnstone, but he lost his place for the European game. He comes back in the starting 11 and he has a very good match, because that's what Kai Rolls does. 1 week he's great, next week terrible. Weirdly inconsistent centre half. Middle of the park, Cammy Devlin. Done Cammy Devlin things. Very impressive, trying to win the ball back and disrupt Rangers' play. Not so impressive when he's got the ball at his feet. Actually, I'll add in a third one. Blair Spittle's come back to the mean a little bit in the last 2-3 matches, I think is quite telling. And I think that's where also Hearts have maybe struggled a bit to create or to score. Maybe not so much create if you're looking at the game in midweek, but certainly to score. And he's becoming a very important player. And if he's not quite on it, then the attack just doesn't carry the same weight, because Shanklin's still not at it fully. I thought he wasn't bad in this game overall, but it was more a kind of facilitator role as he was dropping a bit deeper. And Kenneth Vargas will never ever score a chance if he has time to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Kenneth Vargas, I think, must be the most infuriating footballer in the world, because he has lots of attributes that you would kill to have as a footballer. And you see some of the goals he scores for Costa Rica and things, and there's something there. There is a talent there, but there's a reason he's playing for Hearts, evidently, and that's no disrespect at all, because otherwise he would be playing at a very high level. But he has no composure whatsoever. Actually funny you mentioned Shanklin, because in the spirit of being slightly contrarian on what the online discourse currently is, I thought Shanklin played pretty well in a game that was really, really lacking in technical quality and decent passing and decent cut through balls and things. I thought he showed the capacity to do that a couple of times and was actually quite dangerous. I thought the through ball for Vargas for hitting the post, I thought it was a brilliantly weighted, really, really nice pass. And it's another game where he doesn't score, so be it. But I don't think that's the role he was asked of him. And I think in the role he was asked to do, I thought he did it pretty well.
Yeah, I think Shanklin was far from the biggest problem on Sunday, but he is obviously a big problem in the season in general for Hearts. But anyway, that's been done to death, so let's call it there. Alan, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
And thank you to everybody for listening. If you'd like to hear more, then of course we have the Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, where there are hours and hours of extra bonus content about Scottish football, present and past. So get stuck into that if you'd like to hear more from us. But that'll do us for now. Thank you once again for listening. Take care of yourselves. We'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.